Games can be incredible at provoking strong emotions, but it's not often that games try to evoke frustration and self-hatred. To anyone who's seen my video comparing Star Trek to an RPG, you'll remember when I compared Picard to my Wisdom 20 character in Planescape Torment. I got through the planes relying on apology, empathy, self-sacrifice, and passion. This is generally how I play every RPG my first time around. Planescape Torment does a terrific job evoking negative emotions. Your only main goal throughout the entire game is to regain your mortality and die. It's a game that constantly accuses you of being a monster, and asks you to clear your name of the horrible acts your previous consciousness has committed. Acts which have completely shaped the world you're now in. However, in Planescape Torment, there's always a way to progress without knowingly killing anybody, and without upsetting anybody either. So in spite of all the negativity, you know your quest is righteous. Tyranny sets out to stir a completely different set of negative emotions. There will be Tyranny spoilers from here on. I was initially turned off by the forced violence in this game, but upon giving it a second shot, it was one of the best games I've played in a long time, offering a completely new take on the text-based adventure which so commonly puts your character on a pedestal. Give it a shot, or if you already have, give it another shot. Tyranny dangles the pacifistic, diplomatic approach in your face, just for almost every single character to laugh at you for even trying a non-violent approach. Throughout Tyranny, I wanted nothing more than to simply make the world a better place, and yet no matter how hard I tried, horrible, world-changing things kept happening as a result of my actions. My character spent the vast majority of his youth studying in the ways of diplomacy and order, but when you're out on the field, asking an opposing army to let you in so you can speak to their leader, they don't see all that diplomacy. All they can see are the horrible acts you committed during the Conquest prologue, and the fact that you're working for the ruthless mass conqueror Kairos. Almost every time I was in a situation where it seemed like non-violence was an option, it would quickly turn very violent, and my small band of soldiers would quickly wipe away the competition. By the time I realized how few people were going to listen to reason in light of all the atrocities I symbolized, I took on a different approach to diplomacy. I don't want to kill you, but we both know I will if you make me. Where in other games I would rely on stealth or subversion if diplomacy failed, there wasn't any turning back in Tyranny. If I couldn't get them to back down, they were gonna die, and that's all there was for it. If Tyranny's main message could be summed up in one sentence, I think it would be, people will only remember the bad things. I'm being overly generalistic saying that every encounter I wasn't able to achieve a diplomatic victory. However, every major encounter in the game, the ones that affected the most people's lives, was with my enemies. People who had their opinions on me decided long before I came to plead peace. In smaller quests revolving around one or two side characters, I would usually be able to resolve things peacefully, with everyone ending up happier in the end. As a whole, however, the amount of justice and peace I created pales in comparison to the millennium of suffering I had no small part in creating, or all the people I killed outright. Aside from a few failed diplomatic exchanges resulting in bloodshed, you can be forced to do some truly horrible things in Tyranny, things that are comparable to Hitler's acts in World War II. So take my Wisdom 20 character in Planescape, or Captain Picard from Star Trek, and force them to do things that are on Hitler's level. It makes for some incredibly strong emotions. Most RPGs that let you do a pacifist, diplomatic playthrough are a bit of an ego-driven power trip. I'm the voice of reason, nomadically bringing peace, compassion, and understanding everywhere I go, no matter how long disparity's been there. You're in love with yourself as you're doing a pacifist run in games, but in Tyranny, you're absolutely disgusted by your actions. You'll get caught up in the heat of battle for a few moments, sure, but every time my character wasn't fighting for his life, I'm pretty sure he was contemplating ending it. For all I know, there might be a very particular series of inputs that can resolve most conflicts peacefully, but I think the point the game was trying to make was that it's incredibly difficult to do so in a world so convinced that you're the devil himself. Most of the time, the only way things could end peacefully was by convincing the enemy I was the devil, and having them run away crying out for their lives under the notion that I would be taking them otherwise. By the end of the second act, I realized I was on the exact same path Kairos was on before the year zero, before becoming the embodiment and face of evil and ruthless judicial order under the guise of peace. I was at a crossroads. No matter how hard I would fight becoming evil, I didn't know how much control over it I would have. I knew I was going to either be the one who brought true peace to the tiers, or the one who would make Kairos' peace look like true peace in comparison to my evil. In the beginning of the third act, I was forced to do something which could potentially have been truly evil, summon an edict entirely on my own. I didn't know how powerful the edict would be, or under what conditions it would end if it ever did. I had to repel Scarlet Chorus attackers who were trying to destroy one of my spires, and the only way I would stand a chance against them was by summoning an edict. I chose the Edict of Storms, rationalizing in my head that it would be the least damaging to the landscape. Fortunately for everybody, it only lasted a few weeks, and as far as I know, didn't kill anyone outside of the chorus entourage that started the fight. However, the message it sent to the tiers was clear. Kairos had a challenger. Some saw that as a sign of prosperity to come, others simply thought, great, now we have 2 power-mad overlords. I was counting the days before Blade and Mark, the Archon of Justice's assassin, would come to execute me for such high treason as putting Kairos' power into question. But instead, Kairos' first attack on me was in the form of a proclamation. Only one Archon will rule the tiers, be it the Archon of War, the Archon of Secrets, the Archon of Justice, the Archon of Shadows, or myself, the Archon of Spires. And whichever one killed or captured the loyalties of the rest would be the ruler. Presumably, Kairos wanted to weaken me by either killing me outright or killing those who would swear fealty to me. It was also this time that the Archon of Justice would hear my case on which of the 2 Archons of the Scarlet Chorus and the Disfavored delay the conquest of the tiers, started the civil war, and would be executed. Seeing as I wasn't on their good side, I didn't have nearly enough evidence against the Archon of Secrets to have him executed judicially, and I already had the loyalty of the Archon of War, so without the court on my side, I would have to kill or gain the loyalty of the Archon of Secrets all on my own, and with the Disfavored army at my side. Needless to say, he wouldn't listen to me, so I had to kill him. With only 3 Archons, myself excluded, remaining, it was time to give my final ruling on the nature of the 2 armies' leaders. Without sufficient evidence to justify the Archon of Secrets' murder, I knew the court would deem me guilty for sowing chaos into an already hectic situation. With my opinion on who should have been executed clear, we skipped past the trial of the Archons and went straight on to my trial. The Edict of Storms that I ended earlier was ended on a technicality. It was meant to end with the bloodline of the Regents, but after killing the last Regent, it was revealed he had a newborn child. Fortunately, by having her mother denounce her regency, I was able to end the edict without smothering an infant. However, in the Archon of Justice's eye, I had made a mockery of the edict and undermined Kairos' will. He said the edict was a ruling by Kairos, not a riddle for me to solve, and this was my most serious crime. I defended myself by saying that if the edict could be ended on such a technicality, it was a sign of Kairos' dwindling power, and that, combined with my very clear statement of Kairos' weakness that was my own edict, convinced the Archon of Justice to join my side. I had the Archon of Justice and the Archon of War bending the knee to me, and all that was left was the Archon of Shadows, Blade and Mark. When he saw the Archon of Justice defect so easily, as he put it, he appeared to exact his execution. There was no convincing him, and so he had to die like so many others in my story. But with him dead, a new era began. According to Kairos' proclamation, being the last Archon in power made me the ruler of the tiers. However, since that proclamation was clearly an attempt to dethrone me, she quickly sent an army in from the north to kill me, and I was forced to cast another edict in their path to stop them. Many an innocent life died in the second Edict of Storms I cast, and many denounced my name as a result, but it was still clear that Kairos had a contender for her throne, and that's where the game ended. It was a bit abrupt, as the third act was by far the shortest of them, but it's still a fantastic ending. A war had begun between the North and the South, with Kairos and I spearheading either side of the conflict. In the lands I ruled, justice was swift, reasonable, and orderly, with the Archon of Justice on my side, but the game never told me if I was a good ruler or not. The epilogue sequence very deliberately left that ambiguous. I had spent the entire game hoping to make a positive change in the world, and now, I had only an analysis of my actions over the course of the game to determine if that was something my character would do. From a purely black and white perspective, it would seem that with how much blood was shed by my hand, I would become an unjust ruler. There seems to have been no way to get around the bloodshed, so it seems as if the game is asking if justice and peace was at the heart of my character over the course of this journey in spite of his damaging acts. I know justice was in my heart as I went through the game, but was it in my character's? I think so. There were a few points in the game where I was left with only one dialogue choice, and it was typically a brutal one. Did the sights of war overtake his training as a diplomat? It would seem so. If I had to take a guess at it, my existence only prolonged the 4th-century war that Kairos started with her first edict. But the main difference was that once the lands were conquered, my war ended, whereas under Kairos' rule, small conflicts would have started and ended constantly. In the world of tyranny, you gain strength from reputations. It was my belief that Kairos intentionally started small, manageable brush fires like the civil war I witnessed, in order to prolong conflict and bring more fear to her name, thus increasing her power further and indefinitely. All I can hope for is that my character didn't become addicted to the growth of power the same way that she did. I think my character was a good enough person to avoid that temptation, but I'll never know for certain what his true motives were, just as the people of the tiers won't. Very few games focus on negative emotions, and Tyranny takes the upstanding characters behind diplomatic RPG playthroughs and forces them to kill, conquer, and destroy. Throughout the entire game, there's a slight glimmer of hope that you can get a good ending, redeeming your character of their actions. And when you finally get there, the ending is so ambiguous that you have nothing to do but continue holding on to that glimmer of hope.